We have finally gotten our first ever Duo Nation boss unit in Vanguard. This is really cool and finally something more explored within the Duo Nation gimmick, and once again brings up the discussion regarding Duo Nation units and their impact on the game. The first Duo Nation cards, known as glitter units, were introduced in the Booster Set 5 and were based on the Cray Cross Epic novels. These cards are heavily restricted within their archetypes as support cards to complement each of the deck's bosses. Except for Maple, who was also played in other Kedar and Stoicheia decks, they didn't really see play outside their respective decks. Newer versions of these units were released in the Booster Set 8 with the same design philosophy, but these were still only played within their respective decks, except for Mekani and Maple in some cases. More Duo Nation units were released in Festival Booster 2024, and these were designed to be generic and useful in a wide variety of decks that shared their two nations. On release, these cards were powerful and played in all decks that could fit them. These are still used today in certain decks, but have since been power crept by more archetype-specific support and other nation staples. Duo Nation cards have generally been welcomed for increasing deck building flexibility and creativity, allowing players to explore combinations that were previously impossible. At the same time, they introduce new challenges in balance, accessibility, and long-term design. To really understand their impact, it's important to look at both the positives and the negatives. One of the biggest advantages of Duo Nation cards is the increased number of meaningful choices available during deck construction. By allowing a single card to function in two nations, players gain access to shared tools without making decks feel fully homogeneous. As long as the power level is maintained well, they can be seen as an option rather than a necessity. Duo Nation cards open up unexplored space and interesting possibilities when seen from a design perspective. Bushiroad can print support that bridges themes, mechanics, or lore connections between nations without straight up merging them. Things like Duo Nation energy cyclers, lower rarity cards with simple generic skills, or even Duo Nation ride lines that work differently depending on the chosen nation, all become possible. This keeps the game fresh without constantly introducing brand new mechanics. Duo Nation cards can also make it easier to build multiple decks, notably for new players. Being able to use a single playset across two nations lowers the need to buy separate staples for each deck. This makes experimentation and casual deck building more fun and accessible, particularly if these cards were available at lower rarities. If Duo Nation cards were printed at lower rarities, they could also reduce the number of redundant filler cards in booster sets while lowering deck costs. Simple effects that already exist, such as plus 5k power or plus 5k shield, don't need to be nation locked in the first place. Printing them as Duo Nation cards would make commons and rares more flexible and actually relevant again. For example, reprinting the current Duo Nation cards in lower rarity would be a huge plus for the overall health of the game. A major downside is that many impactful Duo Nation cards are printed at a high rarity, like triple rare rarity. When a single card is good enough to be played across multiple nations, demand spikes and prices rise quickly. While reprints have helped keep some of these cards in check, the risk remains that future Duo Nation staples could become expensive must-haves, especially if they're only available in the high rarities. In many cases, Duo Nation cards are so heavily restricted that the Duo Nation nature barely matters. Cards like the glitter units are so locked to the specific archetypes that the Duo Nation label feels more like a chip flavor than a game mechanic. The card's innate power can also create an illusion of flexibility. Balance is by far the biggest long-term concern. If Duo Nation cards are too strong, they risk becoming auto-includes in every single deck that can play them. Festival Booster 2024 is a good example of this. On release, several Duo Nation generics were played everywhere, until newer archetype-specific support or generics slowly pushed them out. This creates a delicate balance problem for future design. If Bushiroad decides to create try lines with Duo Nations and allow decks to mix cards from these two nations when deck building, it would create an environment where weird and broken interactions exist, since the current pool of cards was not designed with this in mind. It would also make older decks obsolete, since they cannot use cards from a different nation. Divination cards are powerful, but need to be handled carefully. When used moderately and thoughtfully, it can greatly improve a player's deck building experience. The new Liel Animus softly hints at what is possible with Divination boss units. More ambitious ideas, like Divination Grade 3 bosses with certain restrictions, could push the game in exciting directions, even if the current deck construction rules make that unlikely for now. At the same time, opening up deck building too much or printing overly strong Divination staples risks blurring all nations' identities and making the game harder to balance. The challenge for Bushiroad will be to find the sweet spot between encouraging creativity and flexibility without turning Divination cards into mandatory expensive staples yet again. So, what are your thoughts on Divination cards? Do you like them? Have any ideas that Bushiroad should consider? Anything you'd like to see in future releases? Let me know in the comments. I'm happy to read all your ideas. If you like this type of content, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay positive.